The night she was traded away smelled of damp earth and burnt oil, the kind of smell that clings to memory long after hope has left. Rain slid down the cracked window of the truck as it rattled toward the edge of town, and she watched the familiar lights disappear one by one, each fading glow carrying a piece of her childhood with it. Her name was Mira, though no one had spoken it with kindness for years. In her parents' house, her name had become a reminder of what they believed she had failed to give them: grandchildren, legacy, proof that their bloodline would continue. When doctors whispered the word infertile, the house grew colder. Love turned conditional, then it vanished entirely. Before this story goes any further, if you love deep, emotional stories about resilience, family, and unexpected hope, subscribe to our channel and share this story with your friends. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. Mira remembered the exact moment her mother stopped touching her hair. It was after the final appointment, after the last test confirmed what everyone already feared. Her father didn't shout. That would have been easier. He simply looked through her as if she were already gone. The deal was made quietly, the way shameful things often are. A distant acquaintance, a man who promised work and a new start, handed over an envelope thick with cash. No one asked Mira what she wanted. No one asked how it felt to be reduced to a problem that needed removing. When the truck finally stopped, the man told her to get out. There was no farewell, no explanation of where she would go next, just darkness and the sound of tires pulling away. Mira stood there shaking, clutching a small bag with a change of clothes and a cracked mirror she'd owned since childhood. She didn't cry. She felt emptied of tears. Dawn found her walking along a forest road, her shoes soaked, her hands numb. That was when she saw the lumberjack. He was enormous, broad-shouldered, with a beard streaked with grey and eyes that looked older than the trees around him. His name was Elias. He was loading cut logs onto a battered truck, 4 children sitting nearby on a fallen tree, arguing over a piece of bread. They fell silent when they noticed her. Elias straightened slowly, assessing her not with suspicion, but with concern. She tried to speak and failed. Her knees buckled before pride could save her. Elias caught her before she hit the ground. He didn't ask questions right away. He wrapped her in a rough coat, handed her water, and told the children to make space in the truck. That simple act, being helped without conditions, broke something open inside her. Elias's home was a small wooden house deep in the forest, scarred by years of hard winters. The children, Jonah, Ruth, Caleb, and little Anne, watched Mira with open curiosity. Their mother had died years earlier, and grief had shaped them into a quiet, resilient unit. Elias gave Mira a place by the fire, a bowl of stew, and a simple offer: she could stay as long as she needed. No explanations required. Days turned into weeks. Mira learned the rhythm of the house: early mornings, the smell of pine, the sound of laughter mixed with arguments. She helped where she could, cooking, mending clothes, reading to Anne at night. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt useful not because of what she could produce, but because of who she was. At night, guilt clawed at her. She believed the lie her parents had sold her, that she was incomplete, yet the children clung to her, trusting her with scraped knees and whispered fears. Elias watched quietly, respect growing in his eyes. He never looked at her like she was broken. That terrified her more than cruelty ever had. Winter came hard. A storm trapped them inside for days and supplies ran low. When Elias injured his leg felling a tree, panic threatened to undo them all. Mira stepped forward without thinking. She organized, rationed, soothed frightened children, and kept the fire alive through sheer determination. In those moments, something shifted. She realized strength had nothing to do with fertility and everything to do with endurance. One evening, as snow fell thick outside, Elias finally asked her story. She told him everything, voice shaking but steady. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly and said, "Anyone who sells love never understood its value." That sentence healed a wound she hadn't known how to name. Spring brought renewal. The forest softened, and so did Mira. She laughed more. She sang with the children. The house felt fuller, warmer. When word reached her parents that she was alive and doing well, they sent a message asking her to come back. There was no apology, only expectation. Mira stared at the letter for a long time, then fed it to the fire. She chose the family that chose her. Time passed. The children grew stronger, more confident, shaped by stability and affection. Mira became their anchor, not replacing their mother, but honoring her by loving them fiercely. Elias and Mira spoke often, honestly, about pain and loss. Love grew quietly, not as a desperate need, but as a shared understanding. Years later, when the forest echoed with the sound of a celebration, neighbors gathered, children laughing, music drifting through the trees, Mira stood beside Elias, hand in hand. She was no longer the girl sold away in shame. She was a woman who had built a life from broken pieces. She never bore children of her own body, but she raised 4 hearts, shaped 4 futures, and healed one lonely man along the way. And in doing so, she learned the truth no one had ever told her. Family is not created by blood alone, but by choice, sacrifice, and unwavering love. Winter didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, testing the weak places first. Cracked windows, tired hearts, old fears that refused to stay buried. Mira felt it before the cold truly settled, sensed it in the way Elias limped more often, in the way the children grew quieter at night, as if the forest itself was listening. She had been in the Lumberjack's home for months now, though. Time no longer felt sharp or measurable. Life had softened into routines. Wake before dawn, stoke the fire, help Ruth braid her hair while Jonah argued about chores. Caleb followed Elias everywhere, asking questions about trees, strength, and whether a man could survive anything if he tried hard enough. Little Anne slept curled against Mira's side most nights, fingers clutching her sleeve like a promise she was afraid to lose. Yet despite the warmth they shared, Mira carried a silent terror that she was temporary. She had been temporary her entire life, valuable only until she disappointed, loved only until she failed expectations. Every laugh in that house felt borrowed. Every smile felt like something she might be asked to return. Elias noticed the way she flinched when voices rose, even in harmless arguments. He noticed how she worked until exhaustion, as if usefulness were the price of belonging. One evening, as they repaired a broken chair together, he spoke without looking at her. "You don't have to earn your place here," he said. Mira's hands froze on the wood. "I know," she lied. He met her eyes then, steady, unjudging. "No," he said gently. "You don't." The words unsettled her more than cruelty ever had, because cruelty she understood. Kindness without conditions felt dangerous. The real test came the night Elias didn't return. A storm rolled in early, violent and sudden. Wind screamed through the trees, rattling the house like it meant to tear it apart. Elias had gone out to mark fallen timber before dark, when night swallowed the forest and he still hadn't come back. Fear settled heavy in Mira's chest. Jonah tried to be brave, pacing the room with forced confidence. Ruth whispered prayers she barely remembered. Caleb stood by the door, fists clenched. Anne cried softly, calling for her father. Mira didn't wait. She wrapped herself in Elias's spare coat, grabbed a lantern, and stepped into the storm. Rain lashed her face. Mud swallowed her boots. Every step into the forest felt like walking into her own fear, the fear of losing the only place that had ever felt like home. She found him near the ridge, pinned beneath a fallen tree, leg twisted at an unnatural angle. He was conscious but pale, breath shallow. Relief hit her so hard she nearly collapsed. "I told you to come," he rasped. "You don't get to decide that alone," she said, voice shaking but firm. It took everything she had, strength she didn't know she possessed, to free him enough to drag him onto a makeshift sled. Hours later, soaked, shaking, and exhausted, she got him home. That night changed everything. Elias's injury kept him bedridden for weeks. The responsibility of the household fell squarely on Mira's shoulders, and she carried it, not perfectly, but fiercely. She learned how to barter with neighbors, how to ration food, how to keep children calm when fear crept in. She read stories by candlelight when the power failed. She sang old songs her mother once hummed before love turned bitter. And slowly the children stopped asking when she would leave. Anne began calling her mama by accident at first, then with certainty. The word struck Mira like lightning. She tried to correct her, tears choking her voice, but Elias stopped her. "Let her decide what you are to her," he said quietly. The guilt was unbearable. Mira had been told her entire life she could never be a mother. Yet here was a child claiming her without hesitation, without biology, without proof. When Elias finally stood again, leaning heavily on a cane, he saw the house differently. It was fuller, stronger, alive in a way it hadn't been since his wife died, and at the center of it all was Mira, no longer a guest, no longer a shadow. One evening, after the children were asleep, Elias spoke the truth they'd both been avoiding. "You saved us," he said. Mira shook her head. "I just stayed." "That's the rarest kind of saving," he replied. She told him then about the letter from her parents, about the message asking her to return as if nothing had happened. She admitted the part of her that still ached for approval that would never come. Elias listened, then placed the letter into the fire. Himself. "This is your home," he said. "If you want it," Mira cried then. Not quietly, not politely. She cried for the girl who had been sold, for the woman who had survived, and for the family she never believed she deserved. Spring would come again. Hard choices still waited. The past wasn't done with her yet. But for the first time in her life, Mira wasn't walking towards something unknown. She was standing exactly where she belonged. The forest remembered everything. It remembered the sound of Mira's footsteps when she first arrived, hesitant, unsure, ready to vanish at the slightest rejection. It remembered Elias's grief, heavy as frost on old branches, and it remembered the children, half wild with loss, growing up too fast because no one had promised they were safe. By the time the third spring bloomed, the forest had changed with them. So had Mira. She no longer startled at raised voices. She no longer worked herself to the bone to justify her place. She laughed freely now, real laughter that startled even her. When she walked through town beside Elias, people no longer looked at her with curiosity but recognition. She belonged. And yet, just when life felt solid beneath her feet, the past returned to test whether her healing was real or only borrowed peace. It arrived in the form of her mother. Mira saw her first at the market, standing stiffly near the grain stall, clothes too neat, eyes darting like someone afraid to be seen. For a moment, Mira thought she was imagining things. Then their eyes met. Her mother's face crumpled with something that looked like regret. But Mira had learned that regret and remorse were not the same. She didn't run. That alone shocked her. Her mother approached slowly, voice trembling as she spoke Mira's name, as if testing whether she still had the right to say it. People around them pretended not to listen, though, ever. Word hung heavy in the air. "We heard," her mother said, "about the children, about the man, about your life." Mira waited. Her mother swallowed. "Your father is ill. He keeps asking for you." There it was, not an apology, not accountability, a request wrapped in obligation. "I was sold," Mira said quietly, "not sent away, sold." Her mother flinched. "We were desperate." "So was I," Mira replied. "But I was disposable." Silence stretched between them, thick and final. Her mother reached out, then stopped, hand shaking. "You could come home," she said weakly. "There's still a place for you." Mira smiled sadly. "No," she said, "there isn't." She turned away, not in anger, not in triumph, but in clarity. The forest path back to Elias's home felt lighter with every step. That night, she told Elias everything. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty comfort. When she finished, he took her hands, rough palms warm and steady. "You don't owe anyone your suffering," he said. "You already paid enough." The children sensed the shift before anyone explained. Jonah asked fewer questions but watched her closely. Ruth hugged her longer. Caleb grew protective in a quiet, determined way. Anne refused to sleep unless Mira promised she'd still be there in the morning. And Mira promised. The next blow came unexpectedly. A neighbor's careless rumor turned into a cruel whisper that Mira wasn't a real mother, that the children deserved someone whole. The words reached Ruth first. She came home shaking, eyes red with fury and fear. Mira felt the old wound tear open, infertile, broken, unfit. That night, Mira sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames, wondering if love could be taken away once people decided you weren't enough. Elias found her there. "They said things," she whispered, "things that are true." Elias knelt in front of her. "No," he said, "Fee. Lie. Things that are convenient." He called the children into the room. Jonah spoke first, voice steady. "You stayed when you didn't have to." Ruth followed, tears streaming. "You chose us." Caleb clenched his fists. "You fight for us." Anne crawled into her lap and pressed her forehead against Mira's chest. "You're my mama." Something inside Mira finally shattered, not in pain but release. She realized then that infertility had never been the absence of motherhood. It had been the absence of choice. And here she was chosen. The years that followed were not perfect. There were hardships, losses, arguments, moments of fear. Elias's health faltered at times. The forest demanded its price. Life remained honest and hard, but it was theirs. Jonah left first, chasing education beyond the trees. Ruth followed, determined to become a healer. Caleb stayed longest, learning the land, helping Elias. Anne grew up fearless, anchored by love instead of doubt. One evening, long after the children were grown, Elias stood beside Mira on the porch, watching the forest sway in the wind. "You know," he said softly, "this place wouldn't exist without you." Mira smiled. "Neither would I. They didn't need vows or ceremonies to define what they were. Their life together had already done that." When Mira eventually stood at her parents' graves years later, she felt no anger, only closure. She had become proof that what they believed was wrong. She returned home, to the forest, to the house filled with echoes of laughter, to the family built not by blood, but by courage. And when people asked her story, she told it plainly. "I was sold because I couldn't give life the way they wanted, so I gave it another way."